This week on Back to the Movies, we're talking Paul Verhoeven's Black Book.
The worst memory, let's start with that because I'm specialized in bad things, of course. The worst memory was when I was with a friend, I was 6 then, playing in the street, and apparently we were climbing on a wall that belonged to a house that was used by the Dutch National Socialist Party. So let's say a house that was Nazi-oriented. And then a Kugelwagen came in, like a German Jeep, and basically say, come off this wall. And when we climbed off the wall, they say, put your nose against the wall, and we're going to shoot you. And then we did that, and then they started all laughing and basically say it's a joke. So that was, and I peed in my trousers.
We're going back to the movies. 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 Hell.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Back to the Movies, the silver screen time machine where my co-host and I travel back to a specific year of cinema history to explore what made it special. This season, we're looking at the films of the year 2007. I'm your host, Ben, and with me as always is my co-host, Nat McGee.
Hi, Ben. Do you have COVID? Are you safe?
I got my first shot. I got my Band-Aid on.
Did you get it today?
I got it on Monday.
Nice. I just got it earlier, so I might turn sluggish halfway through this episode. Congratulations. Are you Pfizer or are you Moderna?
I'm Moderna.
I'm Pfizer. Of course, it had to be. It had to be this way.
We can never quite see eye to eye.
I'm so excited to be back. I've been looking forward to this after our Ratatouille episode to kind of just the two of us talking movies in the sky. We had a lot of guests, so it's going to be nice just you.
We had a long
you
run
and
of guests. Yeah.
I have a new mic setup, so I'm like really into singing and hearing my own voice. Okay.
Hey, Nat. How you doing? You watch anything good this week?
Man, I have been watching a lot of movies. A lot. I'm not going to list all of them. I will say this. I've been watching some second movies in anticipation for an episode that's coming up on this show, because we're going to be doing the threequel spectacular, which will consist of Shrek 3, Pirates 3, and Spidey 3. So I watched Shrek 2, and I'm halfway through Pirates 2, which...
Pirates
my
2
God,
is a real slog.
My God, what an insane movie. I can't wait to talk about Pirates 3 in particular, because honestly, it's got its moments. It does have some amazing moments.
Dude, Bill Nighy,
and like there's this I'm only halfway through it. I was just watching it this morning, and like there's some amazing, well choreographed action set pieces that you're blown away by what they did. But Jesus, what a mess. What a mess. So I'll leave it at that.
We got to save it. We got to save it for the threequel spectacular.
So yeah, stay tuned, everyone, for the threequel spectacular: Pirates, Shrek, and Spidey 3. What about you, Ben? You watch anything good?
I did. I like you. This has actually been a really quick turnaround, faster than normal from episode to episode. But I also managed to squeeze in a lot of movies in the interim.
All right, what are the top two?
You recently talked about watching and really enjoying Mikey and Nikki.
Ah, yes.
I saw the first film from Elaine May, the writer and director of Mikey and Nikki, a movie she made called A New Leaf that starred her and Walter Matthau. It was great. It was a little shaggy, like you could tell it was her first film, but it was also hilarious. One of the best comedies I've seen in a while. It's on the Criterion Channel if you want to check it out.
Nice.
I also watched Roland Emmerich's woebegone 2009 disaster movie, 2012.
Oh, I remember that one. We were in college when that came out, and I decided not to go see it with our friend Justin. I was like, fuck that shit.
That was a very wise choice, Nat. That was a very wise choice. We'll have to talk about it if we ever cover that year, because the movie is just sort of a fascinating train wreck, but a train wreck it is.
Okay, cool. I'm glad we both got to watch lots and lots of movies. Couple things that I wanted to mention, and I actually don't have this in the show notes, but I think we owe it to our listeners up top to say, if you haven't watched Black Book, you should watch Black Book, because it's really, really good. And the whole experience, if you listen to this episode, is going to be spoiled. If you have no intention of ever watching Black Book, fine. But like, if you love Inglorious Bastards, if you're into like crazy World War II resistance fighters, you should definitely check out Black Book on Amazon Prime and shut this off right now, because we're just going to ruin it for you.
The movie goes some really unexpected places, and I think going in blind is a real pleasure.
Moving on, please, fans, you should follow us on social media. We're at BttM Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And I've been working really hard making some reels on Instagram.
Nat's doing great work on the Instagram.
Yeah, there's some good ones from the Transformers episode. I basically do these little video edits. They're very fun to make, and they're fun to see people react to. And Ben, I have some good news. One of our reels, all about Michael Bay being a Chad and stuffing the Hasbro executive into a locker, it has 5,500 views on Instagram Reels, which is pretty cool. That's like the most fan engagement we've ever had. So really excited about that. I had to explain to Ben what TikTok is. He didn't understand like the endless scroll. What did you think of TikTok once I had like actually, or Instagram? I showed you Instagram Reels.
TikTok looks like some kind of nightmare technology from like the latest Black Mirror season. Like, it is one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen.
Ben refuses to have any of that shit on his phone. So I literally in a video chat showed myself scrolling through Instagram Reels. And I was like, look, it never ends. It's just a new video. So maybe we'll hook someone.
It's so dystopian. I can't believe it. It's so horrifying.
You can also email us. Our email address is bttmpod@gmail.com. So we're all buttoned up with our socials. It's all bttmpod, Instagram, Twitter, gmail.com.
And hey, you know what? We're not just asking you to do this in a vacuum. We got an email, Nat, and I want to talk about it on the show. So a personal friend, a friend of the family named Jeff, I won't say his last name in case he doesn't want that shared on the show, sent us an email on the BttM Pod email address responding to our Ratatouille episode. And he had a really interesting question that I wanted to get your take on.
Okay.
He asked, or said as a statement, and then sort of asked us for our response to it, that Disney, including Pixar, hasn't made a great animated film since John Lasseter left the company.
When was that, for reference?
That was in November of 2017. I have a list of the films that have come out since then, but before we delve into it for a minute here, I do want to say up front that John Lasseter was forced out of Pixar due to credible allegations of sexual assault. So regardless of whether or not the films that have come out since he left, regardless of the quality of those films, it seems like him leaving was probably in the best interest of basically everyone involved.
Yes. So what are the movies since he left? What was the last movie before he left? And then what's the new ones?
So the Coco releases in November of 2017 when Lasseter is leaving the company.
Okay.
In fact, if I remember correctly, Coco was sort of used to try and shorten the news cycle on the Lasseter departure.
Okay, interesting.
Then the next year, Pixar has Incredibles 2. Disney has Ralph Breaks the Internet.
Okay.
In 2019, Pixar has Toy Story 4, and Disney has Frozen 2. And then 2020, Pixar has Onward and Soul. And then Disney also just released Raya and the Last Dragon.
I mean, yeah, no bangers, no
classics.
instant classics. It's a lot of sequel-y or like, I don't know. Soul didn't really do it for me. Like, it was good, but it just kind of felt like a retread of Inside Out a little bit.
Yeah. Have you seen Raya yet? I don't know.
No,
I haven't seen that one.
I haven't. So yeah, maybe Jeff's right. I don't know. I mean, Coco made me tear up.
Coco works for a lot of people. And I like Incredibles 2, which I think has some really banging action sequences in it. Some vintage Brad Bird in there.
Oh, Brad Bird. Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. But yeah, I like your theory, Jeff.
Yeah. One last point to make on it, which is that we talked about in our Ratatouille episode that the animation cycle, production cycle, is about 3 years long. So it's been about 3 years, plus or minus some COVID delays, since Lasseter left the company. The real test of this theory is going to be the films that come out starting now.
Right.
So thanks for the email, Jeff. If you want to hear your question read out on the air, you want to hear our responses to it, send us an email. Write us on Instagram or Twitter.
On to Black Book. It's time for the story section.
The section of the podcast where Nat recounts the narrative, the plot of the film in 60 seconds or less. Nat, you have your work cut out for you on this one.
Yes, and I have the name for the story section. I'm still doing my
boy.
homework and getting it made before. So the name of the story section this week is Het Verhaal van Zwartboek in 16 Seconden, which is Dutch for the plot of the story of Black Book in 60 seconds.
Nat, I am blown away by your preparation for this episode right now.
Yeah, man, I'm taking this podcast really seriously. So I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I've watched half of Pirates since then. I'm screwed.
Your brain is full of Johnny Depp and his weird painted on eyeballs.
All right, I'm ready though.
Okay, on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, go.
In the Netherlands or Holland in World War II, there's a Jewish girl hiding out alongside her family. Her entire family gets betrayed by coyotes, essentially, that try to help Jews cross the border to escape the Nazis. They betray them. They all die, except for the girl. And she joins up with the Dutch resistance to go undercover while sleeping with seducing a top SS officer. So she's in bed with this guy. He's kind of morally gray. We don't really know if he's the worst or if he's terrible. There's some other asshole Nazis. Eventually, there's a lot of double crosses. The resistance can't really trust each other, and it ends up with a lot of people dying, a lot of people getting betrayed, and the girl ultimately winning out, the war ending, the SS getting destroyed, and the girl getting into Israel. The end.
Not bad. Not bad.
It's really hard to do that, but I tried.
There's so much that happens in this movie. Just like when you get into the second act of this movie, the plot starts falling like an avalanche. Just event after event after ground shaking event. So yeah. I don't blame you for having a little difficulty just getting it all in there.
I wasn't kidding when I said if you're a fan of Inglourious Basterds, you really like this movie because it's like very similar vibe of like anything could happen. Anyone could turn out dead in the next scene. Like you really don't know what the hell is going to happen in this movie. And it never lets up. It's always shifting what you think. It's really impressive and fun. It's also a little overwhelming while watching it.
It is a strange experience. Was this your first time seeing it?
Yeah, first time.
I can't tell you how glad I am that you liked it. I had seen it once before. I remembered really enjoying it, but when I was watching it, I was a little bit like, oh, is Nat going to think this is like too much, too try hard, or too...
I mean, I did think it was a little too much. By the end of the movie, I was like, Jesus, get me out of here. But you can't deny that it's really strong storytelling and really strong filmmaking. So
yeah, Verhoeven is a master.
Of course I'm gonna like it. I feel like you'd have to be a moron to not like this movie,
or at least socially conservative, like in a way that Verhoeven just wouldn't gel with
that's
you at
true.
all.
I'm being that's a little mean to say.
I also really like that you made the Inglourious Basterds comparison because I think that's a great comparison, and I even put that in the notes too.
So it's so similar. It's like, you know, it's not as clear cut as Inglourious Basterds.
No.
Inglourious Basterds is kind of like the dumb American version of this movie in a way, but also smarter. It's two-sided. But yes, very similar world and vibe.
You got the heightened aesthetic, you got the fixation on violence and sexuality. You just basically trade out Verhoeven and his like perverse sensibility with Tarantino and his whole like cinematic reference catalog. Right.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is that Tarantino's just referencing other movies and Verhoeven's like referencing his childhood when you look at their inspirations.
That's a pretty good segue into the book report corner.
Please.
So we talked about this in our first season when we covered Paul Verhoeven's 1990 film Total Recall. But I think it's really important context to go over again. Paul Verhoeven is a Dutch filmmaker. He's from the Netherlands. He was born in 1938 and grew up in The Hague, which is when and where this film takes place. This film is pretty directly based off of both his experiences during the war and his outlook towards the war. He said that like there used to be bodies in the street and bombs going off, Allied bombs, not Nazi bombs, Allied bombs attacking the Nazis who were stationed there. And to him, it seemed like the greatest adventure. That's how he remembers it, was like this grand adventure while his friends and family and neighbors were dying, were suffering.
Yeah, and it's so evident that like we talked about it in Total Recall, but like he's just gleeful with the violence in his movies. And I don't know if it means he actually likes violence, but he just knows how to do it in a special way that's like different than any other movie maker.
He knows that there is something perversely satisfying and thrilling about watching somebody get shot. And he knows how to film it to tap into that part of you that you almost wish wasn't there, but he knows it's there and he's going to expose it and kind of revel in it.
Yeah. But yeah, the movies he makes are just badass. I wanted to get your take on your favorite Verhoeven movies while we're talking about his kind of filmmaking history. All
right. So I have only seen 2 of his Dutch films, this one and Soldier of Orange, which kind of rules, but I don't think either of those make my list. Mine's probably a toss up between like Total Recall and RoboCop. I love both of those films so much.
Yeah, I'd have to say RoboCop. And I haven't seen a lot of I haven't seen Showgirls. I haven't seen any of the other Dutch movies. I have seen Elle, which was a really weird movie and was very intense. And I can't say that I liked it very much, but yeah, he is very, very hardcore.
Yeah.
He's just the violence and anyone can get capped at any moment. It's kind of terrifying when you plug in his movie. And I gotta say, like, when I first plugged in this movie or turned it on, I was like looking at the way it was shot and I was like, man, maybe this was just him like trying to get an Oscar or some shit. Like why does this look like a crappy Oscar, like Hacksaw Ridge? Like it just looks like, and Hacksaw Ridge is also really badass, but it just, the way it's shot is very glossy.
Yeah, there's like almost an artificiality to it. Like it's very heightened.
But then it goes nuts. It goes nuts like 15 minutes in. You're like, oh, no, this is still crazy. It's just a different type of crazy. He's like a little older and reflecting on his own youth.
And reflecting on his nation and their legacy during this period.
Yeah.
This is a very Dutch movie. It's very much about issues related to the Netherlands and its legacy in the war. And I find that really interesting. It's very accessible to an audience who isn't familiar with that. You know, my knowledge of some of the events this film depicts is basically like the scene in Band of Brothers when they're going through the Netherlands.
I haven't even seen that. I gotta sit down and watch it one day.
I think the important contextual question that we should answer going into this film, really the only thing I want to talk about in the book report corner other than Verhoeven's childhood, is how do we get from Total Recall to here? How do we get from the most expensive film, or one of the most expensive films made in the year 1990, a smash hit that stars one of the biggest stars in the world at the time, and Verhoeven is looking like one of the biggest directors of all time, to him leaving Hollywood to return home to make this small war film with a budget a fraction of what Total Recall cost, even though it's 17 years later?
Well, I mean, you look at his resume, his IMDb, and you go Basic Instinct, which was also a hit, right?
Huge hit, critical sensation, cultural sensation. People are obsessed with that movie. But then what happens?
Oh, then it's Showgirls, which I haven't seen. Have you seen it?
I have not seen Showgirls. I actually thought you had because we brought it up the other day.
No, I just remember it being like a legendary, when we were like in high school, that was like the legendary, like terrible bomb, besides like Waterworld.
From everything I can tell, the movie kind of deserves its garbage reputation. I've watched clips, I've seen long form reviews, I've seen short form reviews. I'm not particularly interested in ever watching that film in its completion because it looks absolutely bonkers in a way that I don't think I would enjoy. But the important part of the story is it was a huge bomb and a critical travesty. That film was hated.
So it's just an epic fail. He's got to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. And even though he makes a couple of films in Hollywood, he's just never able to really recover that late 80s, early 90s luster that he had before.
Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't glom on to any of like the sequels. He seems like a real artist though. He's like, I'm not doing no RoboCops 2. Are you kidding me? Like, which was terrible, by the way.
After Showgirls, he's got Starship Troopers, which is kind of a bomb. Doesn't make any money. And then he's got Hollow Man, which was a reasonable hit, but both films were pretty heavily criticized and disliked. And so then he's done in Hollywood. He's back to the Netherlands.
But what a movie to make in the Netherlands. It's not like he's going to make like some tiny drama. He makes a huge war epic.
The most expensive film that had ever been made in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it's great.
When we get to the budget, that will seem hilarious when you hear how much this film cost to make. But still, it was a big deal for the country and for him.
Well, and the movie feels big. It's not like it's it feels like a tiny movie. Like there's huge explosions in the beginning, and
they shoot in like the palace at The Hague in the municipal building, which is gorgeous, and
yeah,
they built like bunkers all over the street to hide modern technology that had cropped up.
Yeah, so I was impressed. I thought that I had been served an epic war film for sure. So let's get into the movie.
We open with a prologue in Israel. We meet our main character, Rachel, and she's runs into somebody from her old days in Germany and seems very upset by it. It's a very sort of quiet opening to this film.
Well, this was what was giving me those bad Oscar movie vibes. I was like, what is this? Are you kidding me? 5 minutes in Israel with my husband? Like, what?
With these characters we don't know yet, and we don't understand the connection.
I'm almost like, why didn't this movie just open on the boat? The boat is when all the family dies, by the way.
I think there's a reason for it, but I want to save it till we get to the epilogue, because I think the epilogue is really interesting. This Israel section forms sort of a bracket, but in the prologue, it does seem kind of pointless.
The one thing that I liked about it was that it gave me a little bit of hope throughout the rest of the movie that she wasn't going to die during the war. But then, of course, I'm freaking out for the last half hour once the war ends, because I'm like, oh God, they're going to track her down in Israel and kill her there.
It does seem like that's what it's setting up, right? Like that's what she's so upset about.
But that ultimately does not happen. So overall, it's fine. It's just a little weird. And I feel like if I recommended this movie to someone and they threw it on Prime and that's how it started, they'd be like, no.
It's going somewhere.
So then we do go back to the war, right?
Yeah, and we get this kind of slightly scattered character introduction that culminates in the escape attempt that you have referenced.
Yes. So yeah, it's a lot. It's like, it's almost like a book in a way. It's like, and I say that a lot, but this one really does feel like first it opens in Israel, and then it's not like that streamlined in the first 15 minutes. There's like a family that she's with, and you're like, okay, in a way, it works really well to the movie's advantage because it's just setting you up for like, dude, anything can happen. The house she was staying in, it just got blown up. The guy that helped her, he just got shot. He's dead.
Yeah, it creates this sort of very destabilizing sense where like the movie keeps introducing things that seem like they're going to be important, and then Verhoeven often brutally removes them from the equation.
This movie is already so not American.
Why did you spend time showing me how the family tells her dinner is ready if you were just going to blow up her hiding place a scene later?
Yeah, it's so, and it's like he's working on a different level for sure, but like I can just see people being like, what the hell is this? It's horrible. It's horrible. It is horrible. It really does capture the horrors of war really well.
It just the sense that like you cannot predict what will happen.
Right.
There are too many factors at play here that can change your circumstances. And he is still establishing some really important thematic elements that'll come up later. The family with whom Rachel is hiding is devoutly Christian. And there's some really interesting things in this movie about like different religions and faith. They force her to recite Bible verses before they feed her, which is so interesting as they're ostensibly saving her life by sheltering her. And yet they see it as an opportunity to, I don't want to say like exact a price, but at least, it's just interesting that they see her faith as something that isn't maybe worth condemning her for, but also isn't good enough to save her. They need her to be Christian if they're going to feed her.
The dad is like shitting on the Jews because they are on the wrong side of the Nazis. And then he gets blown up a scene later. It's just like everyone will just impose their values on anyone they can. It's messed up. I wanted to mention that I love that scene when she puts a cross in the oatmeal syrup. She uses the syrup to make a little cross in the oatmeal, but then she mushes it up when she serves it to herself. And that's just such a great little character moment for Rachel.
A great use of the insert shots too, that tell you exactly how important it is.
Yeah.
That the mushing up is just as important as the formation of the cross. It is a really great little moment.
Yeah, it just shows you like this person is a badass. She's not gonna just submit. She's gonna deal with her situation, and she'll adapt as she needs to. Like, it's kind of brilliant. She puts a cross in, but then she mushes it up. Great character. Can we talk about her?
Yeah, it's Game of Thrones' own Carice Van Houten.
Yeah, she's the Red Woman.
Yeah, Melisandre.
I just wanted to do a little sidebar, Ben. Season 8, How you feeling?
I was quite disappointed. I
Okay.
haven't liked Game of Thrones since season 4. I was watching it out of a sense of obligation.
Yeah. I remember we were texting back when season 8 was on, or maybe season 7. I don't know. And we were like kind of excited, but man, what a shit fest.
I honestly, like, for a show that was really important to me for a really long time, I don't think I'll ever watch it again. It really is incredible how much the ending tarnished the experience for me.
It's kind of the cultural conversation right now, which is that like Game of Thrones got erased. No one gives a shit any. Like, you remember, it was huge. Everyone talked about it.
It was the biggest show in the world, it seemed
Sunday
like.
night television. It was water cooler conversation, the last of its kind, honestly. And like, man, it just, no one cares anymore. Like, how many Stark sweaters have you seen recently? Like,
who's dressing up as Jon Snow for Halloween anymore? Nobody.
I don't even like really remember like who is Jon Snow. Like, what the hell is this? What was I thinking?
I'll say that in those early seasons, Van Houten really makes her presence known. She's a really talented actress, obviously, and I was really excited to revisit this movie because this is literally the only other thing I've ever seen her in.
Yeah, it was a little tough knowing she's Melisandre, and I was just kind of looking at her face because she seems way younger in this somehow, even though it's only like 4 years earlier. But yeah, it was a little distracting at first, but she got through it, especially when she went blonde. I then was sold. But she's really good. She plays a great character, and she basically runs this movie.
Yeah.
She's in a lot of the scenes. She's constantly having to deal with crazy situations and double crossings, and she's just going for it the whole time. And she never gets like annoying or like Oscar baity at all. Yeah. She's just always playing it like a human being.
The movie demands so much of her, and she gives it all. Like I think it's a great performance.
Yeah, for sure. So she gets tricked into getting her entire family killed, more or less.
You get this fantastically shot sequence where after her home has been bombed and they realize that it's going to expose her hiding place, a young sailor picks her up and they flee to his farm, and a Dutch policeman tracks them down. And a sequence that's lit entirely by his car headlights. So he's entirely in silhouette as he enters this greenhouse where they're hiding. He tells her that she needs to run and that he'll help her. It turns out later that it's a double cross, but that scene is really cool looking. I love the really pulpy way that this movie is shot. We were talking about it. It's like, it doesn't feel like realistic, particularly compare this to something like Munich, another movie about the Jewish experience post World War II, or, sort of in a similar vein, and other films like that. This film is going for something really slightly cheesy, but in a really fun way.
Yeah. It did look like a lot of bad movies that are like unwatchable. It still looks good, but it just has that sheen of like, oh God, this is going to be some overproduced nonsense.
It's really like sumptuous. It's really rich. The colors are really saturated. It feels very much not like a film of its time, and maybe like something that's like a little melodramatic. I mean, the film is melodramatic.
Well, and I was also going to say that it's really refreshing to see brutal war in like that full sumptuous color.
Yeah.
Which you don't see all the time. I feel like most movies, especially like victim movies, like about like the Holocaust or about people hiding or people fleeing, I feel like those are very muddy usually. Like they don't really embrace like that golden era aesthetic of like everyone's in suits and like it's still like a beautiful time even though it's the war. Like it's always trying to be like really gross. And even when this movie gets to that point, like it's gross and like literally covered in shit, it's still, the shit looks really nice. Like it's like a bright leathery brown instead of like a dull. But I mean, it does make such a contrast from the Saving Private Ryan aesthetic, from the pianist aesthetic, from the way that these films are traditionally shot. So I wanted to shout out Karl Walter Lindenlaub, who was the DP on the film. He has a really kind of questionable filmography. He was Roland Emmerich's DP in the early days. He shot stuff like Universal Soldier and Stargate and Independence Day, which I think all look really good. But he also shot movies like Jan de Bont's The Haunting, which sucks, and 9 Lives, the one where Kevin Spacey's a cat. This is becoming a theme, Ben. You're like thinking that these cinematographers are like only artistes. They are not the directors. They are just working dudes.
I don't know that I think this guy's an artist.
I mean, they're all artists. Come on. Like, don't be a snob. They're all artists.
Wait, you just said that I thought that they were artists.
No, but here's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that even if they do 9 Lives, they're still an artist. They still made art. It's just, I feel like cinematographers, like, there's only like 3 of them that can like actually pick and choose which movies they want to do.
The film.
And like others are just like, oh great, I'm on this great streak with Emmerich. I'm gonna keep making these Emmerich movies. And it's like, Emmerich stopped calling. It's like, fuck, what do I do now? Okay, I'm gonna do Princess Diaries and 9 Lives. And like, I don't know. Beggars can't be choosers, man.
This is not Good Luck Chuck, where like I think that the downfall of this man's career is a tragedy. This guy was always kind of like, he wasn't making films that were visually challenging. You know, I actually think this is probably his best looking movie, or at least
I just feel like
his most visually interesting movie.
Almost every cinematographer is going to have a 9 Lives in there. They do so many movies. They do way more movies than directors do.
Do you know what the craziest thing about the 9 Lives thing is? That film was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who is himself a cinematographer by trade. He shot Miller's Crossing.
Right. He directed Men in Black, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the Addams Family movies, the first couple.
Surprisingly, making movies is still a way to make money if you're already in the biz. So maybe he didn't, I don't know. Maybe he thought
needed
it'd be
that
good.
paycheck.
Let's move on. Why are we talking about 9 Lives? Can we talk about Franken, the evil fat Nazi that kills Rachel's family?
Yeah, so we get this sequence where they're trying to escape on these boats, but it's a trap, and they all just get mowed down. It's our first classic Verhoeven violence, where it's just
all of
squibs
out of nowhere,
exploding everywhere, and everyone dying, man, woman, and child, just getting shot to shit.
Yeah, and it's honestly way more intense than anything in Inglorious Basterds, because there's like, I had a little bit of foreboding. I was like, something's not right, but like it's only like at a 2. It's not at an 8 or a 9 that something bad is about to happen. It's very, very like minimal. You're just like, maybe something bad could happen. Like the driver's being a little weird. What's going on here? And
then the patrol boat lights flick on.
All of a sudden,
and it's
boom,
machine
boom,
guns.
Boom, boom, boom. It's fucked up.
We meet our villain who orchestrated this ambush. It's an actor named Valdemar Corbus playing Franken.
Yeah, and he's good. He's just another Nazi, another evil SS.
I just wanted to shout him out because this is true for quite a few guys, so it'll come up again later. But I was looking at him, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've seen you play a Nazi in other movies. And indeed, that's the case. He was a Nazi in Spike Lee's Miracle at St. Anna that came out almost around this time, and in Valkyrie almost around the same time.
He has that face. It's like, I feel like that's a really important kind of face to have, that kind of like weird mortician face where he kind of looks dead already. The guy in Inglorious Basterds has it too. The guy who is in the bar scene.
Yeah.
They have a similar like 30s SS vibe that some actors have it. And like the other Nazi in this movie doesn't have it, and he ends up being a nice guy.
True.
But yeah, he's good. I mean, he's not as slimy as the SS guys in Inglorious Basterds. That's going to be my comparison point.
That's down to Tarantino's writing, and I think what he's trying to accomplish here. Franken is a pretty vile person, but he's not clever. Precisely.
No, he's just a career.
He's a rat.
Rat douche. And you know, Verhoeven characterizes him really well. He's evil.
Sadistic. He's lecherous.
But I wanted to say, he's a very talented performer. He does a whistle alongside Rachel at the end of the movie, and he's really good. I always appreciate a whistler. I think whistling is awesome. And then he breaks into a full-on harmony with her. He's amazing.
And he's playing the piano at the party early in the film.
What a talented Nazi scum.
It's such an interesting choice to have him be the one doing that, too.
In another life, he would have been like in a chill band or something, but he just got swept up in this fascist shit. It's very sad. I feel terrible for him.
Verhoeven said that one of the points that he really wanted to emphasize in the making of this film was this idea of moral relativism. That there is no absolute right and wrong in this film, that everyone lives in shades of gray. And that's even true for Franken, he never does anything that makes you like him, but there are these seeds of a different person, perhaps a better person in there.
He harmonizes. I can barely harmonize. It's really, really a good talent to have. So, Damn. All right. So, all of her family and friends die in this awful slaughter, and they kind of fast forward. She ends up getting into a resistance group.
Yeah, they smuggle her into the city in a coffin, pretending she has typhus.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's based off of real accounts that Verhoeven read. I really like that sequence.
And again, super, super confusing because you don't really realize it's her when they open the coffin because she looks like she's dead. And you're just kind of like, what is going on? Did she die? Is that her? But you figure it out eventually. The movie never like fully lost me, maybe until the last 20 minutes, which is a good accomplishment for a movie like this.
And yeah, and she winds up joining the resistance after working her way through a few different levels of people. She makes her way there. On an early assignment, she runs into one of our other major characters, that the person who she will ultimately be tasked with seducing, Sebastian Koch as Munze. He's back.
It really grinds my gears that we're watching these German 2006 movies on my beautiful list of 2007 movies. It's like these goddamn 06ers are making their way into my letterbox list. And I'm just like, dude, it's not an 07. I mean, I know it's an 07 in America.
So Nat is referring to Lives of Others, which was the other time that we've seen Sebastian Koch this season.
Right. And he was great in that, and he's great in this. But yeah, Ben, what the fuck, man? My list is all messed up.
We agreed that we would do U.S. theatrical release as our guidepost.
I know.
Don't blame me for this.
I know. I'm just giving you some shit. He's really good. Again, moral gray. You kind of like the guy, but you're always remembering that he's a Nazi.
He's a very engaging actor. Like he can develop sympathy really quickly. That's true in Lives of Others as well. You never really doubt why the character in that becomes so sort of fascinated by him. And it's the same here. Like this film hinges on Carice Van Houten's character, or Ellis, as she starts to be called under her new alias, eventually falling for this man, and Sebastian sells it.
Yeah. He is a Nazi. And they say, like, this guy has led to a lot of people being killed. Yeah. And I think Verhoeven does a really good job of, like, never letting you fully forget that. When by the time of the end of the movie, because they kind of end up running away together, and you think, like, maybe they're going to make it out, I was kind of, like, really conflicted, because I thought he deserved to die, to be honest. But, you know, you still like him.
The film asks you to consider viewpoints you normally wouldn't consider in ways that are really compelling.
Which, again, is why it's not an American movie ever.
It's true.
It's so not an American movie. Dude, the American counterpart of this movie is like, we're going to get us some Nazi scalps.
I couldn't help but think about that, where I was like, it's totally so similar to Inglourious Basterds, except Inglourious Basterds is like a righteous retelling of World War II. And this film paints the Dutch resistance as being potentially just as bad and corruptible as the Nazis. Like, that's insane as a difference.
When this war's over, you still gonna take out that uniform, aren't you? So stupid when you think about it, but so goddamn good.
So this sequence of Ellis working her way up through the Dutch resistance culminates in a scene I want to talk about. There are some children fighting over food scraps outside a soup kitchen, and they cause a truck crash, which reveals that the truck was smuggling guns. And the truck is full of a bunch of the young resistance fighters that we have met. And this scene is a great example of one of Verhoeven's greatest strengths as a director. I think he is maybe the best director at depicting calamity.
Yeah. Things
cascading out of control and going disastrously wrong.
Right. Yeah, it's really, really engaging, and he doesn't do those like obvious build things, which I think can kind of guide you through a movie and kind of help you understand like what's going on. But his strength is not doing those things and pulling it off anyway and making you feel like kind of like shit. Like you feel terrible because things went so badly so quickly.
There's never like a near miss. It's never like something might get discovered but then isn't. Or if there is a near miss, somebody else pays for it. Somebody else got shot. Somebody else got captured.
I mean, there are a couple near misses, like when she has to install the microphone. There's still some of that there because I feel like you couldn't just have a movie that's all just things going wrong every single time.
No, it's true. It would be less powerful if you did.
Yeah, because there are real near misses in real life.
He saves it for a few choice moments.
Yeah, so when things just go terribly, it's great. And it happens like 7 or 8 times in this movie.
It just the way the events cascade in this scene, the boys discovering some food, starting to fight over it in the middle of the street, the truck having to swerve out of the way, and then crashing so that the guns fall out, but the doors are jammed, so they can't get out of the truck, and then there happens to be a police officer there, and then oh man, it's just, the way the dominoes fall is so satisfyingly anxiety-producing.
Should have ran over the kids. When you're in the resistance, you run them over. No, nothing compromises the mission.
So we're now about 30 minutes into the movie, maybe a little bit later, and this is when we get sort of our main spine that's going to carry us through a lot of the rest of the film. One of the young resistance fighters who is captured is the son of the resistance leader, Kruppers. And so now Ellis has to infiltrate the SS to try and see if there's some way to rescue the boys.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that they have a scene with the Nazis talking about what happened with the truck, and they refer to the resistance as the terrorists. And my 2007 themes alarm bell just went off. I was like, oh my God, the Nazis are referring to the terrorists. What are we saying here?
Verhoeven made one of the greatest works of anti-fascist satire of all time with Starship Troopers. And you better believe there's some really interesting stuff in here. I love that you said that, Nat, because a few scenes later, when we see the Nazis torturing the quote-unquote terrorists, they use simulated drowning. They effectively use waterboarding.
Yep. I mean, we don't have to say anything there. The comparison has been made.
Again, this could never have been made in Hollywood.
Right, exactly. I wanted to also mention a thing that comes up a lot when my fiance Jessie and I watch movies. There's a scene here, I don't know where it is exactly, but Ellis sees Franken at the party or something. Muntz takes her to a party and she sees Franken and she has a moment. She gets a little sick, and Jessie and I have this rule that every movie has a vomit scene, no matter what. And she hates vomit so much that like every time it happens, we're just like, every movie, it's in every movie. I think Ratatouille might have had one. I think Linguini pukes in an alleyway or something. But yeah, every single movie has a vomit scene, especially The Exorcist.
And Verhoeven is going to show you. Like, if any director is going to show you, it's Verhoeven. And he does. And it's gross. But that's sort of his whole vibe.
It's just vomiting is such a cheap trick. It's like how to make it look like someone's freaked out or disgusted or whatever. I buy it if it's a, like there's a dead body and something smells really bad. Like I would vomit then. But like everyone is just vomiting whenever they feel bad about anything in any movie. They're just like, wah. Like
this is Nat's like, cinema sins. Just ding that every time that happens.
It's every goddamn movie. Anyway.
So
then they never are diarrheaing. Okay, sorry.
Well, we'll get to the end of this film. So she begins her job infiltrating the SS. She strikes up a relationship with Muntz. At the same time, she's also developing a relationship with one of the other resistance fighters named Hans. And that'll come up later. He's our cool resistance fighter. He's always got a level head. He saves them from some Nazis early on. He's a crack shot. He's a doctor. He cares about getting insulin for his patients and stuff like that.
He gets first dibs on Rachel. They just like randomly hook up for no reason other than that it's hot.
Yeah, other than that, I guess they're mutually attractive and she was dyeing her pubic hair.
Right. Kind of a...
Because Verhoeven is Verhoeven.
Kind of a sexual assaulty scene there, but you're kind of like, oh, okay, I guess she's into it. Whatever.
There's a lot of great stuff here. The film has some beautiful location work. Again, it was shot in The Hague, and this municipal building where they film all these scenes is just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a cool building. What's next? So she's spying.
Yeah, there's some stuff here that I really like. Just the sort of the casual cruelty that she witnesses.
Oh yeah,
and the way Verhoeven like forwards Nazis. That. It's Nazis, but just like he does it so well and spaces out so perfectly. Where it's just like, oh, she's beginning to have feelings for Muntz. She's working her way through the system. She's successful at her infiltration, and then she's making copies and someone's being tortured and screaming.
Yeah, her friends.
And the way that those scenes are paced they're really horrifying.
Yeah, she's in the system, the sick Nazi system.
what's unique about the way that the film presents those kinds of scenes is that in another movie, it might be about testing her cover. Like she has to maintain her cover in the face of watching her friends get tortured. That's not really what this movie is doing. It's more just like testing her humanity.
Right.
Nobody's noticing that she's freaking out and caring about it. It's just her having to deal with it every day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what makes this movie different than the rest. It really hits you in the feels. And it's not just it is a wild ride, but there's more to it than that.
So she gets a job in the secretary pool. There's only one other girl who works there because another really interesting thing about this movie is it's set at the end of World War II. And
right. They're just riding it out.
The Germans know that they're losing. They know that they're going to lose at this point. The resistance is gaining strength. The Allies are closing in. They're talking constantly about how the British will be there any day, how the Russians are in Berlin. And so there's this sort of sense of impending doom. So there's only one other girl who works in the secretary pool. It's just the two of them there.
Mm.
And one of her jobs is to plant a microphone in Franken's office, in the evil Nazi's office.
Yeah. And she does it.
And yeah, I think it's a fine scene. It's whatever. It's like reasonably tense. Somebody's coming in around that time. But it then leads to one of my favorite scenes in the movie. She returns to Resistance Base where they are listening in on the microphone. And they hear Franken talking with Van Gyn, the Dutch policeman who tricked her into exposing herself and her family on the boat in the opening sequence. And how Van Gyn and Franken have been in cahoots to run this scam where they convince wealthy Jewish people to try and escape, and then they rob them and kill them.
Yeah.
And it turns into this really fascinating debate where you have all these characters in the Resistance discussing what kind of action they should take. Ellis wants to kill Van Gyn to prevent him from delivering another list of Jewish names that will be led to slaughter. But another character, a lawyer named Small, argues that he has worked out a compromise, a ceasefire with Munza that says that if they don't kill any more Nazis, the Nazis will stop killing resistance agents. Because again, the war is almost over. Everyone at this point just wants to survive.
They just want to run out the clock.
And then you've got other characters like Kruppers, who only cares about rescuing his son. And so he'll sacrifice any number of Jews if that means that he gets his son back.
Yeah.
And you've got Theo, one of the only surviving young resistance fighters, who is a devout pacifist and is horrified at the notion of killing anyone else. And then you've got Hans, who we will learn much, much later is secretly part of this scheme and is working with Franken and Van Gyn, who desperately wants to kill Van Gyn to maintain his cover. And so you have all of these really distinct characterizations with different motivations colliding in the scene in a really, really well-written way.
Yeah, it's really intriguing stuff. I mean, it never grabbed me quite like some of the random debates in Inglourious Basterds.
Right.
But it's
Tarantino's such a master of the suspense of those scenes, and this scene doesn't have that.
I was a bigger fan of the next scene when the kidnapping goes horribly wrong, and it's just, again, like, so fucking crazy. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. But it does start to get a little knocking me around a little bit too much, where I'm just starting to kind of lose some of the threads. I still was there at this point, but by the end of this movie, I was out of it. I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I still got it, but it was a tough to keep track of what exactly was going on, because I'm not really a spy thriller type person. So like when they just started killing everyone and when everyone started to be bad, I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But this scene was a great version of that, for sure.
What do you think of the Small character? I think he's one of the most interesting characters in the movie.
I was sketched out by him the entire time. I was so sketched out by him.
The movie paints him, he is the red herring, right? He is the one that you think is the traitor in the resistance group who is feeding information to the Nazis.
Well, it would just make the most sense because he's the one that everyone trusts. At the beginning of the movie, she's like, I trust you. And he's like, you shouldn't trust me. And you're just like, maybe he's a Nazi.
and Verhoeven's like all over it. He's like, I know the person who says that is the person they'll suspect. We see him opening a safe full of diamonds. Like the movie goes out of its way to paint him as the most likely suspect. And part of that is that he is the one arguing for compromise with the Nazis.
Right.
I think that's so interesting that Verhoeven is feeding into and supporting this tension between compromise and collaboration, so that you, all the way up to the point that he dies, you're willing to believe that Small is the bad guy, even though he is the most moral and just person in the entire movie.
Yeah.
who is constantly working to save as many lives as he possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, it's muddy and it's interesting, but it's also tough. It's tough stuff.
It kind of feels like the movie's taking advantage of you a little bit
A
sometimes.
little bit, for sure. For sure. Let's keep going with this. You wanted to talk about the relationship angle here?
In the next section of the film, we see Franken begin to seize power. Muntz figures out Rachel's game and forces her to confess to him.
It's really well done. I loved that scene where she strips, she's naked, it's really sexy, and he completely figures out what's going on. Not that she's a spy, but just that she's Jewish.
He just lays it all out. He's like, I understand that these can't be coincidences.
Yeah. And she says, "Are these Jewish?" And she points to her breasts. And it's probably the greatest use of nudity in a movie I've ever seen. It's not superfluous to the story. It's very much a part of the story, and it's still really sexy. It's a very impressive scene. I was gobsmacked by that moment.
It's a great scene. I think the Muntz-Ellis relationship works really well, mostly down to the performers, just both being really consummate actors.
Yeah. I gotta say that this was around the point in the movie where I was getting really giddy about what is gonna happen. After the kidnapping and after the romance going, he knows she's Jewish now, because most movies are gonna be he's gonna find out she's Jewish at the very end. It's never gonna but here
it's almost I think it's their first scene being intimate together that he figures it out.
They throw all the cards on the table and you're what are they gonna do? What are they gonna do now? How is this gonna play out? And those are some of my favorite moments watching movies, is when you're invested in the movie, but you're I do not know what is going to happen now.
In this scene, the sort of the scene where she confesses to him is also so great for that, because the kidnapping has just gone terribly wrong. She goes to get in bed with him and he's got a gun on her. And he's like, I know you're a resistant spy. I figured it out. You're caught.
Yeah, and then you press pause and there's still an hour and a half in the movie and you're what is going to happen?
And he's like, either I will kill you or you tell me what's going on. And then the scene cuts and you're like, what's going to happen? And the resolution is that she told him, and that his response is to then confront Franken for his part in this illegal murder and robbery scheme.
Right.
Which is just so unexpected, the Nazi found out who she was, but the response is to take her side. I loved it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. But then, of course, that plan fails because it's a Verhoeven movie. He can't expose Franken.
That we get our second regular occurring Nazi, Christian Berkel, as General Krautner, who mediates a confrontation between Muntz and Franken outsmarts them. Again, Berkel, I've seen in every fucking World War II movie from the mid to late 2000s. He was also in Miracle at St. Anna. He was also in Valkyrie. He was in Inglorious Basterds. It got me thinking when I was looking at these guys' IMDb just to double check which movies they were in. Do you think German actors ever get tired of playing Nazis?
Maybe some of them. But actors love getting roles, dude.
I mean, that's true. But imagine if there was a major foreign film market that just kept casting prominent American actors to play slavers. That's what we're doing to these guys over and over and over again, is forcing them to relive one of the worst moments in their country's history.
Don't Chinese movies all have white bad guys from America? Isn't that a thing?
But they're usually playing
European
imperialists from the Middle Ages or the early Renaissance.
I mean, yeah, they probably are kind of okay, I'm playing a Nazi. Fair enough. I don't know.
I guess it's work.
It would probably it's work. It probably depend on from person to person. I'm sure you could look it up, and there's plenty of German actors that are I will never play a Nazi ever again. And then they just have to go play Stasi, or they have to play Hans Gruber.
I just feel bad for the ones who get typed. I mean, yeah, I guess that's the point. Is that if they weren't doing that, they probably wouldn't be getting cast in American films.
Do all fat, later aged men just with beards just hate playing Santa Claus?
That's totally different.
I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, anyway, so after Franken outmaneuvers Muntz and gets himself put in charge, gets Muntz arrested, we get our big second act climax action scene during an attempted breakout, where the resistance is going to go try to break out 40 hostages that have been captured as a reprisal for Van Gyn's murder.
And you really think they have it in the bag this time. You're like, okay, they've got the plan, they've got the intel, they've got it all. They're going to do it this time.
They got the inside man. Ellis is there to open the coal chute. And the movie kind of tricks you by like hinting at the way things might go wrong. Oh, she got coal on her legs. Somebody might notice that. That might be important. Oh, it took her a long time to get down to the party. Somebody might notice that. Might be important. No, the Nazis already know.
Yeah, and like even the way that Verhoeven constructs it, where like it's during the party, and you're like, they're not gonna ambush them during the party. That would never happen. That makes no sense. Like that would ruin the party. And then guess what? The party gets fucking ruined.
And the people are just going nuts and screaming and trying to run away. And it's just a symphony of calamity. It is crazy how bad this breakout goes.
Everyone dies except for
Hans.
Hans. And does the Christian guy die?
He's not there. He doesn't participate.
Okay. Did he make it out of the movie? I can't remember.
He did. He's there when they're disinterring the bodies.
Okay. They needed to give him like one more little moment. I kind of missed him at the end. But yeah, this breakout is the worst breakout in history. All of the people going in.
They go in with like 6 guys to rescue 40, and it turns out 45 of them wind up dead by the end of it. Like it's insane.
Yeah. And the guy's son dies. The guy who was so ambitious about saving his son at any cost, that guy dies. Yeah. Like they all just get screwed. And it's, again, you're just like, oh God, what is going to happen now? Fuck. Like, it's killer.
And then after we watch all of these people get butchered, Franken reveals that he knows Ellis's plot, that he knows his office is bugged, and he frames her for being the collaborator with the Nazis, for being the one who set up the break attempt by basically lying into the microphone. It's so crazy how bleak it becomes.
But then immediately she gets rescued. And this is where I was kind of like, what the hell is going on? How did that just happen?
Because the resistance isn't the only party acting here. Muntz has his own escape plan.
Yeah, it's
and
nuts.
He brings Ellis with her.
It's wild. It's a wild ride. So they get out. They're doing a little lovey-dovey situation.
They're living on like a boat tent?
Yeah, it's very Dutch.
Yeah.
While that happens, it's VE Day, baby. The war's over. You really didn't get that. I guess it's because it's in the Netherlands that like it's not your typical like June 1945 that you see in most movies where it's like the Führer bunker is like being decimated and like everything is blown up. Like nothing is blown up, but it's still the end of the war. So that was kind of interesting to see that side of things.
Yeah, but it's the liberation of Holland. We see the Canadian troops parading down through the streets of The Hague and the people celebrating. I love Ellis's companion from the secretary pool, this woman named Ronnie, who has been a Nazi collaborator, managing to hide herself amongst the crowd by just picking a random Canadian soldier and being like, "You're my boyfriend now."
Yeah, she makes it out of the ringer there with the terrible prison that Ellis ends up in. Ellis and Rachel are the same person, by the way. We kind of switched halfway through, but that's her. Yeah. That's her cover fake name. Ellis is her cover name.
Ellis de Vries.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about how Verhoeven's feeling about these, once again, fashy individuals at the end of the war. All or nothing.
It's kind of brutal. Like the scenes of cruelty that we see, the worst ones are done by the Dutch nationalists after the war.
Well, besides the shooting and the torturing.
But we see like the iconic images from the liberation that again, like I had seen like Band of Brothers, which is the women who had dated Nazi soldiers having their head shaved, being forced to carry signs labeling them, Nazi whores, things like that. Really like brutal social stigmatization. And then those who had done more are arrested, captured, and put in these basically like civilian controlled prisons that aren't even under any particular jurisdiction.
It's a really shitty prison. It's bad.
And Ellis is one of them. She and Muntz try to make their way through the city. They go to confront Small, who they think is the traitor. And Small reveals that he isn't, but that he knows who is. He's worked it out in his little black book. But before he can tell them, he and his wife are brutally murdered in front of our eyes. Muntz is also captured. And
are we to assume that Hans did that, by the way?
Definitely.
Okay. He's just running around the city murdering people while the liberation happens?
Yeah.
This is where the movie I was kind of like, okay.
So this is based off a real incident.
Right, that a guy died.
A lawyer was murdered in like 5 days after the surrender.
I'm sure that's real. It's just like Hans did it himself. He's like, it's again like the Sunshine ending, where it's just like he's running from place to place, just hitmanning everyone.
No.
It's pretty funny to me because he also kills the Nazi guy. He sneaks up on his boat and kills that guy too.
That's true. He's all over the place. He gets Franken when Franken is trying to retreat back to Germany with all of his stolen loot. Hans catches up with him.
I was a little disappointed at that death. I think we could have shot him in the kneecaps first and let him cry a little bit.
You wanted to see Franken tortured a little bit.
A little bit. Come on.
Again, the movie, like Verhoeven picking very carefully, when Hans is eventually discovered and killed, it's a pretty brutal scene that he draws out. But Franken gets like a quick, almost off-screen death.
It wasn't that bad for a movie.
He suffocates inside a
I know,
coffin.
but like, no one's gonna remember that. It sucks for him, no doubt. But like, that's not a memorable movie death.
Did you ever read the Edgar Allan Poe short story about the sailor who thinks that he's in a coffin, he's been buried alive, but he's actually just like in a bunk? I read that when I was a kid, and it really fucked me up. Like I still think about that all the time. It's one of my worst fears.
Oh, interesting.
So I found Hans's death very, very upsetting.
If you can't see him dying,
the movie
not
keeps
gonna get
cutting
that
to him
upset.
in the coffin as the light disappears and his
Yeah,
oxygen
yeah.
runs out.
Okay, we'll do a poll. Comment at BttM Pod. Was Hans's death terrible, or was it not that bad?
So Ellis winds up in this prison, and they brutalize her. They literally cover her in shit.
Yeah, and like we said, it's an oaky
It looks
Mirkwood.
like a nice creamy cup of coffee. Where
Oh my god!
This is gross.
Wow.
This is our worst episode ever.
Okay. But the Canadian government intercedes and reins in the savagery. Once again, the Anglo-Americans and English-speaking people are the people that with the civility that it takes to rebuild after the war.
Hans is there too as a representative of the Dutch royal family, like the prince's court or something like that. He says.
Oh, and he picks her up and he's like,
Yeah.
I'll help you. Anyway, there's a guy speaking English who's like, it's savagery. What is wrong with it?
Yeah, the Canadian guy who's there is just like, this is barbaric.
Yeah.
Verhoeven's loathing of this moment, his shame, maybe his hatred of the fact that this is what his nation was reduced to after they finished defeating the greatest evil of all time is palpable. It's a really powerful statement.
Even in a World War II, the most clear-cut war of all time, objectively, there is still no black and white.
Yeah.
And we've heard it time and time again, but this movie does a really good job of proving that.
We get a reveal. Hans takes Ellis to his office. He tries to kill her by having her overdose on insulin. She manages to save herself by eating some chocolate.
Great little filmmaker moment. Another classic, I'm a smart filmmaker. I have established the chocolate, and here it is, and it's a
Plant and
surprise.
payoff. And
Yeah.
when she staggers out into the balcony and jumps down, like, I remember the first time I saw it, like, gasping, like, not expecting that to be what was about to happen. I thought
There's
maybe
more
he'd
chaos.
poison her or she'd push him, but instead she just leaps from a second-story window and the people catch her and she's able to escape.
Verhoeven should have directed he should have done like a Borat movie. Like, I feel like he would be really good at like the shit where like Bruno ruins the fashion show by like covering himself in Velcro and getting covered in the curtains. He could probably have some genius ideas for Sacha Baron Cohen.
He has this playful contempt for humanity that is it's funny sometimes.
Him and Michael Bay needed to team up at some point.
While Ellis is trying to escape, we get this sequence of Muntz being executed. What do you think of this?
I wanted to ask you about the theme of I will personally give the order to fire. Like, they say it a couple times in the movie. I will personally do this. I will personally do that. They make it a point to say, I'll personally do it. It's like, I will personally post this podcast.
Sure.
Is there a thematic element to that?
I suppose it sort of ties into the moral relativism where it's like, I will take personal responsibility for this because this is something I fundamentally believe to be right. Or wrong.
Yeah. Okay. I dig that. But yeah, I had two thoughts at the same time. It was like, On the one hand, I was like, did this movie want me to sympathize with Muntz? He's still a goddamn Nazi, and then he dies, and I'm like, okay, good. They're not going to end up, this isn't going to be like a weird Nazi apologist movie.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I was like, how did that bald Nazi pull that one off? That is ballsy. That's amazing. Occupying army, and you're just like, I'm going to enforce the rules of my army. And like, he just gets away with it. It's crazy how he does that.
And so this is Christian Burkle back as General Krautner, who like has fully turned on Muntz after Muntz failed to expose Franken. The craziest thing is, again, this is based off a real thing that happened. The Canadians were so overwhelmed with trying to remove the German troops from the Netherlands after the surrender that they basically let the Germans run the show.
Okay.
There was a very famous incident where German POWs under Canadian supervision carried out a mass execution of deserters, of soldiers who had deserted
after
right
the war's
before.
over. You think you're done.
Days after the war was over.
Wow.
And it's considered kind of like a black mark in wartime law history.
I guess the movie like didn't do a great job at establishing how messy it was, because everything seems pretty controlled, other than the prison being kind of out of hand. But like the movie makes it seem like this guy just walks in and is like, listen up, I'm gonna kill this guy. And the Canadians are just kind of like, okay.
The Canadians like, I got too much other shit to deal with. I guess if you want to, go ahead and do that.
But I guess, again, in war, you're not gonna necessarily be like, this is a moral outrage, because to them it's just another goddamn Nazi SS captain. Like, fuck them. This is when I was really, really nervous that somebody was gonna come out of the shadows and kill her. Yeah. Especially that dad. I was like, he's gonna come get her, because he said like, I will kill her no matter what. And I'm like, oh, things are a little too tidy for her. She's made it out alive of this situation and that situation. He's gonna come out at any moment. But then again, movie doesn't do it. Movie never does what you expect.
She goes to him. She goes to Kruppers, the former leader of the resistance, and convinces him of what she has discovered, which is that Hans was the real traitor.
Yeah, and he buys it because she's got the books to prove it.
And Verhoeven sets the scene over the exhumation of mass graves.
Yeah,
which is a really just, again, he's not like a subtle filmmaker, but he has an eye for making you feel the worst parts of what he wants you to feel. And this scene really, really got to me, where it's like they are digging up his son and he isn't even allowed to grieve because there's something else he has to do.
Here's the other thing. It's never like ridiculous music or like ridiculous long take of somebody just crying. It's always just like there in the moment, and it's always just happening. There's never that like platoon Willem Dafoe getting shot 50 times to like crazy soaring orchestral music. It's just like, no, man, things are just gonna happen.
It's that childhood Verhoeven outlook where he's like, yeah, people were digging up graves. Like, I don't know, it's not that big a deal.
It really does remind me of like someone telling a story that's like, dude, when I was like 10 years old, I saw a lady get killed by a jaguar that ran off the street. It was crazy. There was blood everywhere. I saw it. It was fucked up. It fucked me up forever, dude. That is Verhoeven. Let's finish up the movie. What else? There's a couple more points here.
With Kruppers and Ellis united, they track down Hans. They lock him in a coffin that he was trying to use to escape. Again, another plant and payoff, a callback to how Ellis made it back into The Hague after her failed escape attempt way back at the beginning of the movie.
Right.
And then they close the coffin fully so that he suffocates. And I found it really upsetting.
And I was like, okay.
He's in the coffin and he's trying to shove out gems and money to bribe her.
Over the top.
And she just shoves it back in. I love it.
Those are the moments where you're like, no, this is not an Oscar movie. This is a Verhoeven movie. For sure.
And then we get our epilogue as Kruppers and Ellis sit by the side of a lake listening to Hans die. And they wonder what they should do with the stolen money. And they wonder what they should do next. We cut back to Israel, where we'd seen in our prologue, we had seen Rachel. We get a really beautiful counterpoint where we see her beautiful family. And then we see the sign showing that, she lives in this kibbutz that was funded by the victims of the Holocaust.
She did the right thing with the money.
Franken's crimes ultimately went to building a new life for people who had suffered. And then Verhoeven contrasts it with the sounds of gunfire and explosions and soldiers rushing to the guard towers set around the kibbutz.
Yeah, and I was completely clueless as to what was going on, so please enlighten me.
So I mean, obviously, Israel has had a very difficult history, has a lot of enemies in the region, had a lot then, but this is more specific than that because a title on screen tells us that this scene takes place in 1956. And 1956 is the year of the Suez Crisis. This is one of the first major military conflicts Israel was involved in after it became a modern nation. This is only 7 years after it was made an independent modern nation. And in 1956, they invaded Egypt with the backing of the UK and France in an attempt to place the Suez Canal under Western control. For Israel, it was largely a reaction to attacks that they were suffering from Palestinian insurgents, from Fedayeen, who were striking from Egyptian-occupied Gaza.
Well, now that you say this, I'm remembering The Crown, which covers this.
Some of this stuff,
but from the English
Suez
perspective,
crisis. Yeah.
where they're just like, oh, there's some fighting in Israel now, and it like ruins some guy's career. But yeah, it was a little weird, little bit of a weird ending there. It's cool in theory, but like to just end on that shot of like a battle just starting, it's a little bit like confusing, but it's also poetic. I understand. Never would be an American movie.
It gives you the sense of like this kind of this empty, this hollowness of this lack of closure, that there is no escape. There is this moment after the war has ended where Ellis is in Hans's office and is just trying to figure out what's going on and learns that Muntz has been killed and breaks down, and she says, will it never end?
Yeah.
You know, this idea that like how much suffering is enough suffering, and the ending really puts in perspective, there is no end to it.
It's never enough.
There's always conflict. There's always hatred. The darkest parts of human nature will always lead to suffering. And by particularly relating it to, you know, the Jewish experience during World War II and then afterwards, I mean, I think it's a really moving and interesting ending. And I think it also makes the prologue a lot more meaningful by contrast, where you're like, this is what this was setting up. This idea that the war isn't over.
Yeah. War never ends.
That the suffering has not ended.
A heartwarming note to go out on, Mr. Verhoeven. Thank you for that.
What a film though, man. This movie is just, it's so bold.
It's really bold. It's, again, if you listen to all of this without having watched the movie, I'm amazed. We just ruined the whole thing for you. But if you got to see this movie, but only if you haven't listened to this podcast. So we're kind of in an anomaly now. But yeah, I'm like sad that I didn't see it, but I'm also happy to have discovered it now, because it was just so refreshing to see a good ass movie like this. Shall we legacy?
Let's do it. Box office. I already said this up top. This was the most expensive Dutch film ever made at the time. According to Wikipedia, it was 3 times more expensive than any Dutch film before it. The budget of this film, this super expensive Dutch film, was $21 million.
That is actually really impressive to me.
That's crazy. This movie would cost nothing.
Does that count like money given to them from the government? Like, remember Lives of Others was funded through government money?
Yeah. I do think like there are some interesting stories about the financing of this movie where like there were lawsuits because people didn't get their investments back. Clearly, you know, the Netherlands has a much, much smaller film industry than the United States does. Investment in film there is a very different prospect than it is here. $21 million was a big ask for this movie. But I think all that money's on screen. And I think it's really impressive that he was able to pull off something of this scope with that kind of budget.
That explosion looked good.
Yeah.
When they blew up the house at the beginning, that looked real.
So that was a real pre-war farm that had been condemned.
So they blew it up.
That was scheduled for demolition.
Oh, hell
and so
yeah.
they blew it up for the movie.
I thought it was CGI for sure. No, it looked good. Okay, so how'd it do?
It opened in the United States on April 6th, 2007.
Oh, the day after my 17th birthday. I should have gone to see it.
In 35th place, making $112,000 its opening weekend.
Wow. Well, I'm sure it was only on like 3 screens.
It went on to gross 4.4 million domestically and 26.8 million worldwide. So it was not like a hit. However, it was the most commercially successful film in Netherlands history.
We had seen Total Recall. It's like, come on, guys. Paul Verhoeven made a fucking war movie. Go see it. Yes, it's in German. Get over it. Or it's in Dutch. Come on.
The film was kind of overlooked. The Netherlands submitted it as their foreign film Oscar submission, but it was not nominated. for Best Foreign Film that year.
Whatever.
It did earn some accolades, though. I discovered that there was a Dutch film periodical called VPRO Cinema that had a poll in 2008 where its readers could vote on the best Dutch films ever made. Black Book, number 1.
I'm sure it was. I mean, come on. All right, themes, 2007 themes. There is no 2007 technology in this movie, so unfortunately I can't do my favorite section of the show.
We got Quagmire.
It's our favorite. Giggity. It is our favorite theme for sure. And it's honestly one of my favorites that we talk about almost every episode, which is that a lot of 2007 movies are based on some form of quagmire where you're just stuck in the lurch, and it's kind of reminiscent of the quagmire that the global war on terror was causing at the time, that we were just stuck in the Middle East in a war that made no sense. And why are we still here? It's been 6 years since 9/11. What the fuck is going on?
And maybe it's a little tedious that we point out every week. However, I think it's worth noting we're pointing it out every week. That didn't happen in 1990. There were no universal themes in 1990, but almost every movie that was released in 2007 was in some way about this sense of being stuck.
Every movie that we're covering.
True. But we didn't deliberately choose the Quagmire movies.
It's true, we didn't. We just chose good movies and some bad movies. But yeah, maybe Meet the Spartans has a quagmire. I don't know. What else
is an artistic quagmire. Voyeurism is back, from Lives of Others. This film has a lot in common with Lives of Others just because it's another spy movie about people spying on each other, about watching each other.
Yeah, for sure, which was going to be a thing in the near future with the Snowden revelations, and we saw it in Bourne as well.
Right, all over that one.
Yeah.
We got corruption again, conspiracies, all that stuff is
institutional
popping
corruption
up.
that comes up a lot, and this is chock full of that.
That's a very Verhoeven thing too, where like he has absolutely no faith in institutions at all.
Right. Yeah. And you got one more here, I see.
I just think this is interesting. This movie comes at it from a very different angle than the other film we talked about it did. But this is the idea of like sort of nationalism and xenophobia. We talked about it with 300, which was almost unintentionally underlying these themes by being nationalistic and by being xenophobic. And this film is a very deliberate and overt criticism of those ideas.
Right.
Where you have the Dutch nationalists being painted as some of the most horrifying monsters in the film. And you have scenes where xenophobia and racism are called out by other people.
Yeah, we'll have to come back and see if that pops up in some of the other movies that are coming, because it hasn't been in all of them.
No.
But maybe it'll pop up. I can think of one that I'm really excited to talk about that it will definitely pop up. So yeah, let's keep that one in mind.
I just think it's really telling that Verhoeven, who made RoboCop such a brilliant takedown of 80s consumerism, who made Starship Troopers such a brilliant takedown of fascism and military fetishism, would be really tapped into the dangers of this period in a way that almost no other film has been.
Yeah.
Deliberately comparing the fight against terrorism to Nazism. Like, there's some really powerful and troubling stuff there.
Yeah. All right, we're going to close out the show. This has been really fun. Thank you for showing me this movie, Ben.
I'm glad you
Hopefully
enjoyed
I'll
it.
get to return the favor during this season, because Good Luck
you did.
Chuck...
You showed me Good Luck Chuck.
Good Luck Chuck doesn't count. That was an experiment of sorts. I'm sure there's one.
Make sure to tune in again next week. We're going to be talking Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. So that'll be a big one. That'll be a lot of fun. We got a special guest for that. I don't think it's streaming anywhere, which is just ridiculous. Warner Brothers, you made your big streaming service. Why don't you have your most popular film franchise on there? Who knows? But anyway, tune back in for that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Ben, why don't you take us out on our socials and our thank yous?
Thanks to Andy Gagnon for our music and Jackie Saltzman for our artwork. Remember, follow us at BttM Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Email us bttmpod@gmail.com. You can also follow us or interact with us on Letterboxd. Nat McGee and Hain101 are our usernames.
My favorite social media platform by far. If anyone's not on Letterboxd and you love movies, you really should be. It's super fun, and it's like Facebook, but it's only with movie and movie reviews, and it's the shit.
It's the only one that I can even manage to do some of the time. I don't do it all the time, but I do it more than I do any other social media.
You need to write more reviews on Letterboxd. They're really good and well thought out, and they're great. So just write them all the time, motherfucker.
Hey, and also leave us a 5-star review. Next week, maybe we'll start reading some of those out or doing something else to say thank you to those of you who do.
Yeah. Please write one. We will definitely, if you write one this week, we will shout you out for sure. All right. That concludes this episode. For Back to the Movies, this has been Nat.
And I'm Ben. And we'll see you next week when we go back to the movies.
You know what I was drinking during this episode, Ben? You're going to laugh at me.
What were you
I'm on a bit of a diet. Trying to lose some pounds. I was drinking Lagunitas Hop Refresher. All it is water and hops.
Just drink water. That sounds awful.
It was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
It's like beer tea.
I liked it. I don't know.
Hey, great. Lagunitas sponsor the show.